Our final speaker should need no introduction, but for those students among us who are new to graphic design, I will definitely introduce her. Ellen Lupton is a designer, writer, and educator. She has authored and co-authored numerous books about graphic design, including Thinking with Type, Design is Storytelling, and many more. She's a teacher, a design chair, a curator, and a storyteller. Ellen will explain today how people actively experience a poster, a website, or a retail environment, how designers build narratives, and how concepts such as the narrative arc, the hero's journey, and the rule of threes encourage emotional responses. I'm sure many of you will have questions for Ellen at the end of her presentation, so we have allowed a little bit of extra time if she has the time to spare. For now, I would like to welcome Ellen into that Design Fest. Hopefully you have a very strong cup of coffee next to you because what is it, 7 o'clock, 6:30 a.m.?
It's 7 a.m. here and also raining. So I feel very connected to you.
I think, yes, I think we sent all the rain your way then.
Yes, it's a lot of wet. So thanks for having me. I'm delighted to join you.
You're very welcome.
I'm going to grab the screen and do my show. So I'm going to talk about storytelling. A story is a line from A to B. We start somewhere, we go somewhere. And of course, a talk is also a passage and a journey from A to B. So we'll go somewhere together. And here's a little map of what we'll talk about. I'm going to talk about my exhibition, The Senses, where I really discovered the idea of engaging people, not just with their eyes, but in a sensory way. And we'll talk about some ideas in storytelling. To give you a little background about me, I went to art school in New York City in the 1980s, which is way before the computer and so many transformations that have taken place in our field. And I realized I'm going to stop share because I didn't share sound. And I'm back. Okay. This is my friend and life partner, Abbott Miller. And we went to school together at the Cooper Union. And back then, there weren't very many books about graphic design. This was one of them. And it defined design as problem solving. And this to me was completely new idea as a young person. And walking around the streets of New York City, some of the examples of modern design included the New York City subway signs, which are still in use today, and created this beautiful layer of order on top of the chaos of New York City mass transit. And this was a great example of problem solving in graphic design. But I was also inspired by aspects of graphic design that didn't seem to solve any problem, where designers were working in an experimental way and playing with language and knowledge and philosophy. And this reflected books that I was reading outside of class that weren't books about graphic design, but which touched on the role of design and architecture and printing and writing in the making of society. And this was very inspiring to me and seemed to have nothing to do with problem solving. So I went on to be a curator and writer and educator. And I was very interested in that other side of design that's more about storytelling and creativity and maybe adding something extra to life, not just solving a utilitarian problem. So these are some of my books. And today I'm going to talk about ideas from these two books, Design is Storytelling and The Senses. design beyond vision. And I also want to introduce you to my friend, Type Mom, who's my kind of alter ego on the internet and was born this year and likes to tell people about graphic design concepts. And like your real mom, she's a little bit embarrassing, but she loves you very, very much. And I'm going to show a little video of Type Mom explaining the principle of negative space. And I bring her in to my discourse today because she very much uses the senses to get us interested in design ideas. And she is a storyteller. She likes to weave a lesson from beginning, middle to end. So here's a little message from my dear friend, Type Mom. Oh no, what is negative space? Negative space flows around the main subject. Positive, negative, figure, ground. Positive and negative shapes can switch places. Negative space can reveal a hidden message. Try drawing the space around letter forms. Negative space, it's a thing. Sweet. So the idea of sensory metaphors and sensory ways of thinking is really huge for me. This exhibition, The Senses Design Beyond Vision, was open at Cooper Hewitt Museum. And in this exhibition, we invited people to explore objects and space really with their whole body. And that's an idea that many designers have explored. This is a diagram by Herbert, who was a designer at the Bauhaus and teacher at the Bauhaus. And he shows this museum goer who is looking, right? He's a giant eyeball, but he's moving through a kind of sensory environment. And we can see he did this in his own exhibitions by creating a kind of media world, very visual, very much an assault on the eye. But in exhibition design, we can also add texture and movement and warmth. And this is a beautiful design by Lily Reich, who created this space using curtains and fabric, which changes not only the texture of a room, but also the sound, because it absorbs sound and really changes the way we experience space. So I've become very fascinated with sensory design and with exhibitions as a full-on sensory experience. So this is our exhibition in New York City, designed by Wendy Evans Joseph, who created for us this beautiful kind of system of textile walls that wrap around the objects and create these kind of miniature rooms. Rooms that you can see through, rooms whose walls you can touch. The walls move. They have this amazing tactile presence, and you're up close to them, and they really became part of the exhibition. And one of the projects was a giant wall made out of black fake fur. And people would walk into the exhibition and immediately go and pet the wall. You didn't need a sign that said, touch me, because everyone wants to touch a big furry wall. And when you touched it, it activated sound, the sounds of an orchestra. And so the more people that were touching, and depending on where they touched the wall, it created different kinds of sound effects. Or you could approach these objects inside these glass domes, which are printed, 3D printed out of materials like sugar and curry and tea and coffee. And you could approach the this vessel, which has a little opening in the top, like a navel, and actually smell the objects inside. So we think this is the first museum display case with a built-in smell port, a place for smelling. And there were lots of things to touch and experience. This is a beautiful set of spoons, like dessert spoons, that add to your experience of food by having this additional texture and stimulation in the spoon itself. I just find that that's so inspiring. So I want to give you a chance to experience a little sensory design. I'm going to play a short audio clip with no picture, okay? And we will all create our own picture in our mind. And then after we listen to it together, I'll show you an animation created by an artist who collected these sounds and made his own visualization. But first we make our own, and we let the sound create a picture of a place, an atmosphere. There's even a temperature and creatures. Okay, so let's listen. Isn't that beautiful? So now I want to show you an animation by Andy Thomas, who collects these sounds of tropical birds and creates these beautiful abstract animations of the sound. And what I want you to look for when you see the animation is the sense of sound coming and going. That sound is an event that bursts onto the scene and then fades. It has layers, it has moments, and how he's used color and line and transparency to also convey the sense of heat and atmosphere in a tropical forest. So I always wonder how that compares to the sounds that the pictures that you create in your own mind, right? That may be similarly atmospheric and kind of indistinct, but full of life and triggered by sound. This is a project by one of my graduate students at MICA in Baltimore, and she wanted to create a system for representing sound, for visualizing sound. And in her system, the shapes get bigger when the sound is louder. And this is very intuitive, right? Small sound, quiet, big sound, loud. But the shapes also change with the pitch of the sound. So when the sound is very sharp, high, piercing, the shape is sharp. And when the sound is low, it is more round and soft. And this is a tactile metaphor. And the way we describe a sound as being sharp or piercing is a tactile way of talking about sound. So here's an animation by Ran Zhang. So beautiful, such beautiful work. Okay, here's something else I want you to try. This is the correlation of taste and sound. And this is an experiment that was done by a physicist and a mathematician and musician. in Argentina. And they worked with a group of trained jazz musicians, and they asked the musicians to create a short improvisation in response to a taste. So they did sour, bitter, sweet, and salty. And then they looked for common patterns across these improvisations. And they found that musicians tended to interpret sour as having a very high pitch, short notes, and a lot of dissonance. Whereas bitter tended to be low and kind of soft and not much articulation between the notes. Okay, so let's try it. Let's taste some sound together. This is sour. Like lemon, lime, sharp, sparkling. Coffee, Earl Grey tea, chocolate. I just love that experiment. It gives me so much joy. And so that brings me to our other topic of storytelling, because sensory experience is so much part of stories. Stories make us feel something. And as designers, we want to do more than just convey information or solve a problem. We want people to feel emotion, to feel something in their body, to have a memory of what we create for them, the experiences that we create. And experience is sensory and emotional. So let's talk about a path. Every story has a path, a movement, a journey. In some stories, the path is almost a character. It's so important. So the fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel, the little children are always making a path through the woods, which sometimes gets them in trouble. Or the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz, or the road in Mad Max, Fury Road. It's all a journey from one place to another, and ultimately a journey home. And if we look at an image of a path, this path invites the viewer to step into the forest. Our eye travels down the path. We enter. The path creates point of view. And designers and artists have always known this. Garden designers create paths with a curve, right? We don't want to go straight to the trash can. We want some kind of movement through our garden, some mystery, a curve towards the end of the road. So when I saw this beautiful 17th century landscape painting, I was upset because this perspective leads me right to the horizon. It just takes me to the end too quickly. There's no journey. But then I started walking down the path with my eyes, and I realized that there was an opportunity to turn. And as designers and artists, we like to create these opportunities, right? These chances to digress and move, to learn something over time. This is an illustration by Christoph Niemann, and we're looking at the top of the illustration, and we see a woman, possibly type mom, hanging out some laundry to dry. But we come to the bottom of the image and we discover, oh no, the laundry is attacking me. And so this story is revealed over time. Our eye travels from top to bottom. And even though it happens in a split second, It is temporal. It is a path. So I want you all to think about your work as designers as always and always incorporating time, even a still image. We are inviting viewers or users to make something happen, to reveal a message over time. This is another illustration by Christoph Niemann, and I want you to just imagine in your brain, what are the hands knitting? And here is the answer. So again, a path over time, a revelation over time. This is a beautiful garment by Giambattista Valli from an exhibition at Cooper Hewitt called Beauty. And we start at the top and we travel down from the utilitarian beginning to this froth of pink. And we have made a journey through time and space. So beautiful, this path of change and transformation, which is ultimately what every story is. Every story has an arc. It begins from a point of low energy. We start and we begin and we climb the mountain of the story. Our hero is looking for something. Our hero reaches a point of maximum crisis, and then they travel down the other side of the mountain to the resolution. And without that resolution, we don't feel satisfied by the story. We need that sense of an entire arc, a coming, a going, a completion of an action, like a roller coaster. We rise, we fall, it's complete. And so one way that designers tell stories is in panels, right? Like in a comic book, we have A, B, C, we tell a story. So I'm going to show you a little panel story created by the design company Red Antler with illustrator Tomi and it's an ad for a Casper mattress. Okay, and these were shown in the New York City subway, and it was so much fun to read all these stories, these visual stories. So in the beginning, bacon meets egg, and then bagel meets coffee, and they all end up, it's breakfast in bed on the perfect mattress. And so we have this arc. Creatures meeting, creatures getting together, and then a punchline at the end, breakfast in bed. Storytelling also is small actions. It's not always a narrative with creatures and people doing things and meeting. So if we think about interface design and how we're engaging a user on a long journey to buy something, to learn something, to register for a service. That's the long story. But we also have countless small actions which must be complete, which must be whole, which must convey change. So these are some beautiful interface icons by the design team at MongoDB. And each one conveys change. There's a reading, a movement, a change. The checklist is complete. The fists bump. The pendulum swings. The conversation has a response. So even something as small as this can be designed by you with a sense of change, of transformation, of something happening. Because that's what stories are. In a story, something happens. Oh, it looks like Type Mom is back, and she wants to show you a story about something. And I'm going to use this to talk about narrative structure. So this is a video about choosing type sizes in your work, creating hierarchy with typography. So in the beginning, she poses a question. In the middle, there's some action. She shows you physically how to choose sizes. There's some conflict. because if the story simply is solved immediately, that's not very interesting. And then there's an end, there's a conclusion. And many stories end with a moral, with a message, but they can also end with simply a sensory delight, a kind of beautiful final image to leave you with. And sometimes Type Mom likes to do that. So here's a little video, and I want you to look at the narrative arc of the storytelling. Oh no, how do I choose type sizes? Let's start with 3 sizes: small, medium, and large. Too similar. Let's go bigger and smaller. This type is all the same. Still feels almost the same. So make the big type bigger and the small type smaller. Now let's style our type to make this baby sing. Bold, italic, small caps. Let's move this tiny line to the top. Nice. Mix it up and make it different. Narrative arc. Okay, it's one of the basic principles of storytelling. Another structure of storytelling is the hero's journey. And the hero's journey is a circle and is found in literature all around the world for thousands of years. And the way the hero's journey works is our hero is at home minding their own business, and they are approached to go on a mission, a quest, and the hero always says no. And then they're asked again and they say yes. And they go on the quest. They're joined by helpers, by friends, and they enter a magical world. They leave the ordinary life and they go to a place with new rules, new and magical circumstance, and of course, dangers and conflicts. Sometimes this is called the green world. And then they exit. They are born again out of that green world and go home. So it's this circle. And as designers, we are often creating that green world, that special world. We are inviting users to cross a threshold into a special place. And in that special place, things match. They speak their own language. They make sense together. If you think about a brand or a wonderful store or restaurant where everything contributes to an experience that is memorable and put together, that's what we do. We invite people to enter. We give them stuff to do when they're there and interesting memories when they go home. So when Dorothy and her friends get to the Emerald City, everything is green, right? This is the brand message of the Emerald City. This is a store in New York City, a camper store. And I was across the street and I see this giant logo from inside the store beckoning me to cross the threshold and enter this magical place. And I do. And here I am in an environment taken over by typography, which I love. But wait, it's a shoe store. Where are the shoes? Well, the shoes are hidden behind the logo, the fins of the logo. So I have to travel through the space. I have to take a journey through the space to find the products. So what a beautiful and coherent and cohesive design journey for me. Designed by Shigeru Ban, great Japanese architect. So what is the shape of a journey? How do these journeys engage us? I wonder if some of you have ever been to an IKEA store. I have been, and I often felt that I was in a maze. So I did some scientific research. I just read some academic papers, and I discovered that actually an IKEA store is not a maze. It's a labyrinth. And it turns out that these are two different ways to organize a journey. A maze is designed to confuse us. We constantly have to choose which direction to go. A labyrinth is a single fixed path carved into a space. And labyrinths are often used for meditative purposes because we don't have to think about where to go next. It's a linear path. A maze is a non-linear path where we are constantly having to make decisions. So let's take a trip to IKEA, where we discover the labyrinth. So we leave the safety of the parking lot and we enter this branded space, right, where everything is blue and yellow and tagged and has perfect matching typography. And we travel a path. And that path is designed to expose us to all the products in the store. The path literally has a separate paving, like the yellow brick road in The Wizard of Oz. It has a curb. It has arrows that keep us moving through space. And it's a journey that if you've been to a lot of IKEA stores, you become very familiar with the kinds of experiences that you will encounter along the path. And finally, you have to go down, you have to descend into the belly of the warehouse. And this is where the real work begins. You have to find all your products, you have to put them on a trolley, you have to wait in line, you have to pay for your goods. This is exhausting work. You are a hero and you have worked hard. So at the end of that journey, there is the final hot dog. And this hot dog is so cheap, they're actually giving it away. And it exists to reward you for completing your journey, and to make sure that you don't freeze to death like Jack Nicholson at the end of The Shining in the maze. You will survive. You will be cared for by IKEA. So we can look at lots of kinds of design in terms of this paradigm of a labyrinth and a maze, a single path, a fixed linear experience versus lots of choices. And they're both completely legitimate and interesting design models. Sometimes we want people to read text, for example, in a linear way, to experience content continuously, or to watch a movie from beginning to end. And sometimes we want to have a lot of choices, and we want people to be able to move quickly between different kinds of information and make their own path, their own journey. And so I really found this very exciting in my own work because I try to make my books a rather nonlinear experience. I like the idea that people can enter anywhere. They don't have to begin at the beginning and go all the way to the end. So I'm going to end with one more message from Type Mom. And this one is about sensory overload, which you are probably all experiencing after 2 or 3 amazing days of this amazing design festival. So here's a final video from Type Mom. Oh no, too many signals. Type doesn't have to be underlined, colored, and bold. Have fun using caps, bold, color, italic, underlines, drop shadows, and more. But if you make everything stand out, nothing really does. Please, don't make your tummy hurt. Only had one chance for that final shot. It was fun. So thank you for going on this journey with me. And I think we were pretty efficient, so we should have time for some questions. Thanks so much.
Amazing, amazing, amazing. Thank you. It's just been such a pleasure to listen to you, Ellen. I'd just like to say a personal hello to Type Mum. Could you just get into character for a minute?
Oh, no, I'm not sure if I can. I just love being here.
Well, we love you being here as well. So, yes, Type Mum, she's the queen. So, big hello to her. Thank you. And thank you for introducing her to us, because it just puts the whole concept of design into an easily understandable perspective, doesn't it? You know, breaking it down to everyday objects, you know, it's just such a lovely thing that you've done for everybody. On behalf of all designers and all new designers, thank you very much. Okay, we've got some questions coming in. I will then reserve my questions until later. So Anastasia asks, seems like the more digital we get, the more sensory experiences we lose. How can we introduce these multi-layer sensory experiences online? Now, that's an interesting question.
Well, that's a beautiful question. So there's a lot of sensory potential in online communication, for example, sound. And there's a lot of ways that we can evoke tactility through visual means. So for example, Type Mom by showing cookies and cake and putting her fingers in the cake. You have to go there with her and imagine your own hands sinking into a green cake. Or we can convey texture. So much graphic design has become completely flat. And so by adding texture, like the incredible illustrations and paintings by Prado that we saw earlier, have so much texture to them, even if we can't actually touch them, we still, with our eyes, experience a sensory response. So I think we can stimulate the senses even through digital means. And I think that's a really great question from Anastasia.
Yes, absolutely. It's probably just exploring and thinking about how those ideas can come through and how those sensory images can be made. We have another question, which I'm sure you can see, but listening to you during your presentation, we really enjoyed how you explain all of your concepts through pulling in different illustrations and images and concepts from all sorts of different things. And so leading into this question is, where do you find the inspiration for what you do?
Well, I love going to museums. I love looking at art. I love cooking and baking. And so when I go to a museum with my friend, I always tell her, to me, everything looks like a cupcake, right? So like when I go to museums, I'm looking for inspiration for what can I make? And I find that because we're creative people, we look at art not just to appreciate and enjoy it, but to actually actively learn from it, to find new threads, new colors, new material to transform in your own way. So I just feel like to be a creative person turns everything else we look at, whether it's nature or reading a book or a graphic novel, that all those things become not only enjoyment for themselves, but also material for your own creativity. Yeah, so that inspiration's everywhere. It's like being attuned to listening and observing it. It comes from
Absolutely. And
having your own project, right? Your own stuff you're making.
yeah, and that is a message that has come out quite clearly in the other presenters that we've had on as well. Um, okay, I'm not sure if I'm going to quite get this right, Jury. So if you can clarify if I don't get it right, this is another question. How do you design things that I'm not quite sure about the first sentence? Sorry, Jury. He's referring to Charles Bukowski's work. Are you familiar
Yeah,
with
maybe
Charles
Jury
Bukowski?
could tell us a little bit about that because I don't know. I'm not familiar with his work.
Yeah, he says that Charles Bukowski's work doesn't fit well with the hero journey. So while we're waiting for a bit more of an explanation on that, we'll skip on to one of the other questions. As a designer, do you ever feel like you run out of ideas or just feel the general lack of an idea when trying to think of a specific design or something? I think we all have that problem. What's your solution?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's really important to recognize that your creative journey has ups and downs and that we're not always up. And so you're just going to have periods of intensity where your mind's on fire and everywhere you look you see a cupcake. And you're going to have periods where you feel bad, you feel low, you feel empty. And this is natural. This is not illness unless you never can get back up again. It's like it's a curve. You think about your day, there are periods of our day where we have energy and periods where we don't. And so you have to respect those low points, and do something else. And there's always something else to do, like fold the laundry or read a book, and the energy will come back. So I really I empathize with that point of view. Last year, I finished writing the third edition of my book, Thinking with Type, which comes out in March and has a whole section on Arabic typography written by Whale Marcos, really beautiful, like a global version of Thinking with Type. When I finished this book, I felt so sad. And you're supposed to feel good when you finish something, but I didn't feel good. I felt lost. And that's when I found Type Mom. And she helped me create something different, a different voice, a different medium, something bite-sized, not a book, but something different. And that really helped me to recover from the lowness of finishing a big project. So I encourage you to find little projects and to embrace small ideas, because the little things can add up into a practice, into something that sustains you over the long term. So just be open to up and down and big and small, and it will all work out.
Thank you. Good advice. All right, Anastasia's back. She got another question. How do you understand that you've got enough knowledge and experience to write a book and tell your story to other designers? Another very good question. Yes.
Well, it requires a certain fearlessness and just willingness to jump in the pool. So I've never really considered myself an expert in anything. I like to read on a topic and learn what scientists and historians and philosophers have said about a topic. So when I did the senses, the book and exhibition, I really knew nothing about the phenomenology of perception or the science of perception. But you know what? It turns out that so many people have written and done experiments and created things, and that my job was to translate it, to tell stories about it, to find examples that the public could experience, and to distill principles of sensory design that designers can apply to their work. So you just kind of jump in and learn, and just do it, and don't be afraid.
Another bit of excellent advice. Sorry, we've just got a question in the chat. I'll get back to the other ones in the Q&A. As somebody who has taught design extensively, what do you think are the most important skills or qualities for students to develop in order to succeed in this field?
I think it's really important to make more than one version of things. And I think I see in a lot of my students that they want to do it once and be finished. But in the professional world, every client wants to have choices. They don't want to see just one version of something. So you need two or three. You don't want to overwhelm them, because then people have a hard time making a choice. It's actually a whole field of behavioral economics, which looks at how to help people make choices. And you don't want to overwhelm them with too many. But if you just say, oh, I did it and I'm done, it's not good perseverance for you as a designer. It shuts down the ability to try more than one thing. So that's my big advice, and a big thing I see with my students is not wanting to try alternatives.
Yeah, I think that's a similar story with most lecturers in this field. We can all feel each other's pain.
People are rushing to be done. Don't rush. Don't rush.
Okay, a question from Rushta. With the upcoming AI technology, sensory experiences is something AI can probably never replicate. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think AI can trigger a lot of sensory experience. I mean, I'm always shocked, for example, the level of detail in AI imagery, which is in detail, background detail, and how difficult that is for us to produce because it takes so much time to fill in everything. So I wouldn't rush to assume that AI doesn't trigger sensory experiences or emotional experiences. I think it can.
Probably gives us frustration at the minute.
Mm-hmm.
That's sensory.
Mm-hmm. It's disturbing, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, jury has come back. So Bukowski's storytelling falls flat without a clear conclusion, where your hero's journey is ups and downs with conflicts and resolutions. So I was thinking,
Sure, okay.
how
Go
can
ahead.
how can we translate this type of storytelling into a design using the hero's journey?
Okay, so I understand your question now. So the hero's journey is just one model of storytelling, and it is canonical, right? So it's a pattern that is recognized and repeated over time. And so is the narrative arc, which is more like from Aristotle, the idea of a complete action. So postmodern writers, of course, have created amazing things that reject the kind of neat pattern making of storytelling. And if you think about real life, people aren't always punished for doing bad things or rewarded for doing good things. Right. But in Hollywood movies and most movies around the world have a moral code that is quite strictly followed. So postmodern storytelling rejects the arc, the familiar patterns. And yeah, so as graphic designers, we can reject that too. So this idea of flatness, right? There's a lot of graphic design right now where all the type is one size and one font, and it rejects a notion of like being interesting or creating typical interesting compositions. in favor of flatness. And that's kind of cool, like cool design. I'm not really a cool designer, so I don't love it myself. I like hierarchy and helping people find their way and showing what's important and what's not. But that is certainly a highly legitimate aesthetic path that postmodern writers and filmmakers have explored.
Do you find yourself much more the traditional designer?
Type mom is pretty old school.
Yeah.
But I appreciate everything. I love to look at everything.
Absolutely. Yes. Question from Ravina. Could you share insights on breaking typographic rules while maintaining the design principles? So breaking typographic rules while maintaining design principles.
Sure.
How can designers navigate unconventional typographic choices to create impactful and cohesive visuals?
Yeah, so like a classic one is there's a rule against squishing type because distorting it, stretching it because it distorts the natural line weights and it makes the horizontals get thick and the verticals get thin. But graphic designers do this purposefully for emotional effect, for surprise, to make, an interesting composition. So if you're just doing it because you don't have a font that fits, and so you just squish your type, that's not very good design. It's not using typography in the way that these tools were created to be used. But if you're doing it with intention, and you can kind of identify, here's why I'm doing it. Well, by all means do it. Same thing with like line spacing that's too big or letters with too much space between them. These are all just ways to work with the medium that can be quite intentional. So always ask just what is your intention? And if the intention isn't there, it's just done out of ignorance, then it's probably not such good design.
Perfect. Thank you. Very clear answer. Okay, funny question and a bit off topic from Anonymous. But I follow you on Insta and I've noticed you use baking to communicate and it's so fun. But I always wondered where all these cookies and cakes end up because there's so many.
Well,
love that question.
I certainly don't eat them all. So every Monday morning, I bring cookies to my graduate students at MICA. And the cookies always have a graphic design lesson. Yesterday, we did Valentine's Day. So I had conversation hearts and ligatures. But they're much enjoyed by my students. And my family.
That set the bar way too high. Thanks, Ellen.
Okay.
Can you retract that, please? Okay, Kanika has a question.
Hey, Ellen, nice to meet you again, and thank you for that beautiful presentation.
Thanks, Kanika.
I had a question about your new book, actually, because I saw that it mentions that you're getting rid of old terms like widows and orphans, and I see that you're always, exactly, and it's more progressive, it's more inclusive, and it questions established rules about type and graphic design. And how do you think we can encourage our students to learn the rules, but also to question them and take bold steps like you have?
Well, I think by being inclusive in your teaching. So historically, the word widow has been used to talk about a line of type that's too short. And there's nothing wrong with widows in the real world. Many of us will be and are widows at some point in life. But in society, widows are often seen as like witches and extra people who, are forlorn and at the end of any kind of productive contribution, right? So it's a word that's often used in a pejorative way. So if we call an error in typography a widow, it's denigrating to these amazing survivors who are everywhere amidst us, right? And who are us, our future. So I prefer the expression short line. And there's lots of people in the typography world and editing world who prefer that term because it's not a joke made by some guys in a print shop in 1900. It's a description of a problem in typography. The line's too short. Easily solved.
We'll be introducing that new typographic terminology. Thank you very much. Exactly. Oh, we've got a comment. We're loving the dog wandering backwards and forwards behind you.
He wants attention, I think.
Oh, you can bring him
Jack.
up to the camera if you like.
I'd be happy to do that. Hold on.
Yeah, do that. Do that.
This is Jack, and he has appeared in several Type Mom videos, always looking a little grumpy.
I was going to say, he probably doesn't quite know he's a star.
And he doesn't like the multiple takes. He wants to get it done once, like a graphic design student.
Okay, we have another question. How do you approach the balance between experimentation and practicality in design?
Well, that's very interesting. I've actually become more of an experimenter by learning to bake. Because when you bake, there's a lot of mistakes and things that go wrong, and you have to be kind of analytical about what happened. And that practice in my life has helped me to not rush to the end. So like we have to ask, what is experiment? Experiment is like testing and trying things and being open to unexpected outcomes. But we also have to be, often serve a purpose, get something done, get food on the table, get the cookies in the box. So I think what I love about your question is the word balance, because really it's ultimately we have to balance everything in life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we may have to start baking.
I warn you, it becomes an obsession.
I think just one more question,
Great.
because we've nearly run out of time.
Perfect.
Well, I could ask a couple more. Well, actually, how do you balance? You do a lot of things, right? You curate, you teach, you write books. So how do you balance all of those jobs?
Well, actually, I left Cooper Hewitt 2 summers ago. So for many years, I had 2 jobs in 2 cities and 2 children and 2 dogs. I still have the 2 children, but they're grown up. Yay. And now I only have 1 dog. I mean, I have 2 dogs, but 1 job. So
now there's no excuses for anybody to say they run out of time.
Yeah.
We're getting protests from the audience here. I mean, that's a life choice, obviously, if you want to manage all of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you collaborate on writing your books? I'm assuming that they're not sole collaborate. That's not a sole process, right? Or is it?
Well, some of my books are solely authored by me, but I've done other books like my book Extra Bold, which has 7 co-authors and like 32 contributors. So sometimes, or the Senses book, which has essays contributed by various experts. collaborating is so important because it helps you draw on the expertise of other people. But like I'm the editor, so I have to like always be thinking about my reader and how to make everything make sense to my readers. So being an editor is a kind of fun role where you're in the background, you're shaping the context, but it's super hands-on and you're responsible ultimately for all that content, you know, because you're the editor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
huge responsibility. They've been so successful though. Was that like, did you, when you started writing them, you just found a gap in the market that there weren't any?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, when I was a student, one of the only books we had was that the graphic design and his design problems, which was hardly an inclusive title or message for a young woman studying design. So I just felt there was not anything, there was not enough.
Yeah.
So I started writing books when I was very young and just kept at it and kept thinking, what would people be interested in?
Yeah.
And they, by and large, have been interested in a lot of it.
Yeah, no, they're brilliant, very brilliant, good resources for all of us. Ellen, thank you so much.
Thank you,
for joining
Margot.
us.
I love
And
being here.
we understand that it's very generous that you've given us your time. And especially at 7 o'clock in the morning. I think you
My
joined
pleasure.
the conversation at 6:30. So yes, very impressive. So on that note, I'd just like to say a very, very big thank you on behalf of everybody that was online listening and that can't respond, unless everybody online can give a thumbs up or a response in the chat. Again, an absolute pleasure. So very happy to have met you. And I hope we have this opportunity again.
Great. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thank you, Ellen.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Jack says goodbye.